One thing that most people fail to see when they read, say, the Bible, or when they read any of the uh, ancient texts, religious texts, or read scriptures about the Buddha, or any of these great people, is that they're all human beings. They have done very great things. So great that we think we cannot attain that, we cannot reach any of those levels. But we fail to see that they are human beings. They have shown what it is to be a human being. And what they have shown is several levels, several layers of what it is to be kind, be gentle, several layers of what does it mean to be human. And each of them followed a path of their life, followed a direction along which they led their life that brought them the most meaning. And in the process of walking that path, helped them to refine who they are, define who they are, such that during the course of their life, or at least towards the end of it, or along the way, they were able to write texts that described their findings, that told what they saw. And it's more like it's more like a journal of the remarkable things that they have experienced during the course of their life, during the course of walking the path that they walked, which we now refer to as the ancient texts. We may, well, fortunately, unfortunately, we may be placing them on a pedestal. Some of us may be only referring to them as sacred texts, not even seeing them as books. And those of us who do see them as sacred texts may not be reading them as verses from wise people, but more like literally taking those words and following them word to word, rather than as, let's say, food for thought. When you eat food, you take a morsel, you take a bite, and then you chew on it, you digest it. And that's how the food gets consumed into the body. Similarly, for the mind, for the spirit, for the intellect, textbooks, just like science, social sciences, mathematics, languages, any language text, what we learn from school, similarly, these are all textbooks. If we consider them as textbook, then every verse, every line that is written there is a subject, is a line from a subject. And if we see and we take each line from the subject as something to be mulled over and inquired into, and thereby come to an understanding of what the text is actually saying, then there is meaning to it. Then we come to understand the subject. Similarly, just like our school textbooks, they may be talking about Newton's laws or a theorem in mathematics. If you're only going to take it at face value, we will not be able to answer the questions during the exams. Similarly, if you read the textbooks, because they are ancient sacred texts, we just take them literally, we will not be understanding anything. If there was a real test or an exam about it, I think most of us would fail. So the point I'm trying to make is, it is important for us to begin to see our textbooks as wise words from people who have, it's more like one or the other form of their journals left behind for us to mull over and comprehend and come to a greater understanding of the depth and meaning of life, and by which to understand a humane, a gentle, a coexistent form of life, of living. So I'll leave us with this thought. From whatever little I have studied of the textbooks, a little of the Upanishads, a little of the Bible, a little of the Quran, a little of the Torah, what I do understand is that these textbooks, several of them are speaking similar things. And I was pretty surprised by how much it is possible to misunderstand what is being written there. And misunderstanding always comes when a topic has not been mulled over sufficiently, has not been thought through sufficiently. Wise people have always said, do not be done with thinking until you are through with thinking. That is, think things through thoroughly until you come to the gist of it. Do not be done with thinking until you're really through with what needs to be thought about it. And most often than not, I would say always, the result of good contemplative thinking would be harmonious, would be non-violent, would be a lesson, more like a pearl. You've seen a pearl oyster? When a grain of sand goes into its body, it irritates it a bit. So a new thought, like a new sentence, maybe like that grain of sand in the oyster's body. And you need to you contemplate and mull over it sufficiently until you form a pearl of wisdom forms. And that would be the gift of what that sentence is actually saying. Hence they would be called as pearls of wisdom. Pearls of wisdom are formed after sufficient contemplation. You don't just take them and just copy paste it, because you would never really get the gist of it. So I invite you that as you go through the textbooks, whatever textbook you consider sacred, try reading one sentence or one or two words in it, a phrase, and try mulling over it, whatever may be it. Open your textbook, open that book which you consider sacred, and try reading one or two words in it, or maybe just one sentence. Don't look for which one would be the most meaningful. Just read whichever comes to your vision when you open the book, and then try mulling over it. And allow for that phrase or for that sentence to teach you something which you didn't know earlier. And most likely, and wait until that message from that phrase or sentence is something that teaches you something about life, or teaches you a better way of living life. And most often that would be a peaceful way, wiser, most definitely wiser, and would have an element of truth in it. Okay, that would be very definitive. So I invite you to try this on and see if this changes something in your perspective of life, of textbooks, and of whom you consider as holy, sacred people. Yeah? Thank you for listening.